Have we reached the point with generative artificial intelligence where we're about to hit that proverbial trough of disillusionment, or are we just at a plateau and there's more greatness with this technology to come? Next up on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me to discuss all things AI are Mike Mason. He is the Chief AI Officer at ThoughtWorks, a global technology consultancy, and Nicholas Mattei, an Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Tulane University. They've both been on the show before, so welcome back to the show, Mike and Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Keith.
All right, so let's just jump right into it. Like, why do I think that we might have hit peak AI in terms of this headed for that trough of disillusionment? There's been a lot of stories recently that have come out in terms of a backlash against some of the things that OpenAI is doing. ChatGPT, for example, the traffic has now slipped for the third month in a row. Companies are finding out that all of the investments they've got in AI, at some point they need to have an ROI around that, and some of the buzz is starting to fade, especially then also with new stories of potential hacking, hackers using generative AI, things like that. So are you seeing that in your arenas as well? Like Mike, from the consultancy side, are you seeing this potential backlash or potential trough of disillusionment? And then Nick, from the academic side, are you seeing that as well? So Mike, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think given the sheer amount of hype involved in this topic, like we're clearly headed for some kind of peak of hype cycle. And naturally, there is always a trough disillusionment after that. So I think that is definitely coming. I think the question is, how soon does it hit us, and does it slow everything back down? Are we going to get another AI winter? I think probably not, because there is more guts to this technology than there have been to previous things that have been in the hype cycle. I think something that's really important for everybody to be looking at is, what am I getting for my investment? Can I do something where I'm experimenting responsibly? I'm not spending a ton of money. I'm just, I'm dipping my toe in the water, because everything is moving so fast in this area. There's news stories every single day about some new breakthrough or some new scary thing. I was reading about brain scanning was the latest thing, that they trained an AI to use some kind of MRI scanning to reconstruct images that a test subject was viewing. So, they're looking at a picture of a cat, because it's obviously, cat dog is the usual AI trick. And what the research has said, yeah, but it's okay. We think that, general mind reading is 5 to 10 years away. What? That's...
Wow, that's amazing. I saw the story about how AI was being used to help paralyzed patients with their, you hooked something up to their brain and then they were able to scan some stuff in. So that was helpful because they were allowed to speak, but hooking up something to my brain and then having it draw a picture of a cat or a dog, that's kind of frightening.
I thought Elon was trying to sell us that for a little while, right? These like neural interfaces, but that's hardware, and that's so far off.
Yeah. That's very sci-fi.
I think hopefully we're a little, we're not quite there yet. On the academic side, I think we're still seeing a lot of popularity, at least in terms of students coming to work on these topics. I think there's still a lot of opportunity. You mentioned kind of like the fall of like folks going to the ChatGPT website at the front end.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the financials, but I imagine this is probably just as much about folks building things out of the API in the back end, right? So I think you're still seeing, folks less engaging with ChatGPT as a chat product, which I think always, in my personal opinion, always had kind of a limited lifespan. Like I can only ask it to do my homework and like write my wedding vows so many times, right? But if it's embedded within, the Word, if it's embedded within GitHub or Copilot or any of these tools that we're using, I think you still see the opportunity for growth there. And I think, at least on the research side, you're seeing a lot of folks do a lot of really fun things with like fine tuning with, how do you take some of these open models, let's say the open model from Meta or, some of these models that are ChatGPT like, and then train them for specific applications. I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the energy on the academic side right now. And I think there's still a lot of stuff to do there. Now, how do you turn it into money? I don't know. If I knew that, I wouldn't be in academia, but that's it.
Yeah, this also came, I think a lot of the hype cycle started with the release of GPT-3, and then right at the end of that, OpenAI then announced, we've got GPT-4 as well. In the academic side, have you experimented a lot with GPT-4, and maybe does it need to be released to a broader audience, maybe to a public, so that they can see that, yes, there is still excitement around this? Or is it the opposite, where GPT-4 came out, and then I saw stories that they're saying it's dumber, it's not as smart in math, or it's not as smart in certain ways. What do you guys talk about in the academic circles?
Well, I mean, sort of what is going into the chat product, so to speak, I would say it's not like kind of the cutting edge of research, right? Like, so the T in ChatGPT, right, is a transformer architecture. That's a paper from Google from like 2010.
Okay.
Right? So that you got to remember, like, the T in ChatGPT is the thing that's been predicting your texts since 2010. So like a lot of this technology has been, being worked on, as it goes. So like the ChatGPT 4 is more of like a product. It's like, does it like add things together? Like it's more on the product side. Whereas like sort of on the academic side, you're looking at the research, you're saying, okay, how do we make like queries against the model cost less? How do we make it able to, how do we make it safer in terms of, not going and saying quite so crazy things? How do we, keep coherence at longer and longer strings, right? And so the question about like, whether or not it's got, because they sort of, with GPT-4, I think they put a calculator into it, right? So it's not even like an AI piece that's a calculator. It's actually just an AI interface to a regular calculator, right? So at this point, especially in that product cycle, I think, and I don't work for OpenAI. I don't know exactly what's going on in this, but my understanding is that they're building a lot of functionality, and they're not sort of using LLMs. They're sort of using the LLM as the interface to more traditional things like Python and like, a calculator and things like that. So, I think really what you're looking at GPT-4 has more to do with how to make it a product than how to make it like in terms of like, is it getting better at the LLM thing, like the word-to-word thing? So
Mike, are you hearing anything around GPT-4 on the positives or the negatives?
So I think rather than, certainly for me as someone looking to use this in business and commercially, the question about is this thing intelligent? What direction is it going in? All of that kind of stuff. Those are all interesting questions that like I pay attention to. But the real question is it useful?
Right.
Like, what can I use it for? Can I get some value out of it? I think the fact that LLMs are now being taught to use tools, like I think ChatGPT can use Wolfram to calculate answers and stuff like that. Yeah. I think that's actually pointing to where these things are going to go in the future. And both Microsoft and Google have demoed agents within their Office suites, so Office and or the Google Docs suite, where those agents can take actions within, say, your email or within your documents and all that kind of stuff, because those agents also know how to use those tools.
It's an actually useful form of Clippy, finally.
Exactly. And so like, I think this agent thing where you can get an AI to do stuff on your behalf because you've given it a bunch of tools, that's really interesting. It's also, I'm pretty sure, kind of an area of very active research about how to make that safe and not dangerous and keep the thing within the box that you've given it. I saw something yesterday where there's a I think it's called local interpreter or something, where you can run an AI on your own computer, because then it doesn't have all the constraints that these online AIs have. But equally, it has none of the safety, right? So I'm not going to download something and let it run random stuff on my machine. Like, that sounds exactly like the definition of malware.
Yeah. Imagine the training set that would be on my computer, for example, versus the data training set, out of the rest of the internet. I think that would be scary for whatever my local computer wants to come up with. But Mike, let me put you on the spot. Is it getting better? Is it useful? Is it more useful than it was when it came out? Or is it about the same level of usefulness?
I'd be hard pushed to tell you that on ChatGPT, because they don't tell you when they're deploying new versions, right?
Okay.
Like, it's just a service, you get to use it. Are we finding more ways to make it useful? Absolutely. Like, there are more and more contexts in which you can use an API on top of, I'm just going to say any old LLM, like ChatGPT is the really popular one.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of open source ones, or open in some way. There's a whole drama and question about what does open actually mean. Do you get the training data? All that kind of thing. But I think we're finding more and more ways to make them useful and better ways to prompt them, to create structure in a conversation between you and an LLM so that you can more clearly kind of keep it on the rails rather than going off in weird directions and all that.
Yeah, Nick, did you have some stuff to add?
Oh, no, I'm just going to say, I think I was going to make the point that Mike made. I think it's a really good one. It's like, it's not just ChatGPT. It's this underlying, when people say AI right now, they mean this underlying sort of generative AI technology,
right.
Like generally speaking, these LLMs or these image generation techniques. AI is a much bigger thing. I feel like as the AI professor, I have to say this, like it's a lot more different things, right? It's like a thing that, routes you through traffic and all kinds of stuff that it does that different AI tools do that you forget about. I think really the question is like, how do we use these sort of text to text models, these LLMs, to do interesting things? And I think Mike's hit the nail right on the head is like, as we use that as the interface to various tools, we see new ways and new ways of interaction, right? So if you remember Siri, when Siri first came out, it wasn't very conversational. It's getting better because it's using this as the back end. We were working on a project with a group here that was looking at the city council meetings. Mm-hmm. And so using the LLMs to kind of summarize what's been going on at the city council meetings and providing these kind of conversational interfaces to folks that aren't going to sit there and read all the city council meetings. Now, there's some questions in that, the answers it gives, and it's not just ChatGPT, it's any LLM, sound very city council speaky, it's like, of course the city's doing good things, right? But like in terms of giving folks a tool and they can say, okay, well, how many times were the potholes on my street mentioned at the last city council meeting, right? Like they're able to go in there and answer these kind of chat-like questions about what the city council's talking about, right? So that was a project we did with a group here in New Orleans. It's kind of just that's the fun part of it, right? There's these neat ways to like use these things as interfaces and enable interfaces that we haven't enabled before.
Do you have do you guys have to monitor what's going on with a bunch of the other LLMs that come out, for example? And again, I'm just going to mix the word LLM with GPT and all of this Gen AI stuff. Like, so Microsoft comes out with Bing and that's integrated into their search engine. And then Google comes out with Bard. And then there's something called Claude, I think, as another one that came out. As you start...
Llama. Don't forget there's Llama. There's a whole menagerie, Keith.
Yeah, it's a whole zoo. And so do you have to monitor that and say if one is better than the other? Because I think the average end user is going to be like, they all feel the same to me. And if one doesn't work, then I just blanket the entire LLM zoo as horrible. Like what do you guys do? Nick, why don't you start?
For me, I'm kind of with Mike here because on the academic side, I want to use like Llama, like some of these the Hugging Face models that are open that I can retrain on my own. Like okay. I use ChatGPT. Honestly, I use ChatGPT in my personal life. Like I needed to write an email the other day that I didn't want to write, so I asked it. I actually use Bard because I'm an early Google user, so I don't get blocked on it. But like for the chat interface, I'll use that. But like in terms of research and like building, trying to build projects around these things, I usually just use the open source ones because those are the ones that are easiest for me to use, right? And I don't have to pay API fees. Okay. And a lot of times I'm more interested in that sort of thing. So I'll be curious to hear Mike's answer on this, actually.
Yeah, how much of this do you have to monitor, Mike?
Well, so basically, this is a lot similar to the question about what cloud platform would you use to build something for a client.
Right.
And if, I don't know, a decade ago, we had kind of fairly strong opinions on which cloud platforms were doing better than others and how we build stuff on them. These days, though, everybody's actually already picked a cloud platform or two that they're already using. And so in a lot of ways, the answer is similar for which LLM do you want to use? So if we've got a client who's already in the Google ecosystem and is using GCP as a platform, we're likely to go with the Google tool suite, Vertex AI, all that kind of stuff. If somebody's on Microsoft or AWS, we'll go with their options. We also keep a strong eye on the open stuff because we do have clients who are saying, I don't want any of my data to go to a cloud provider. I'm concerned about the security and privacy around that. We've got one example of a client in India who is using an open source code completion engine, and they're like hosting that locally using a bunch of GPUs to get it to run fast enough so that they don't have to have their code completion fragments going anywhere. Now, I think it's reasonable for someone to be concerned, but that's the same as saying I don't trust my cloud provider, which certain companies still do make that choice today, and they do have very stringent requirements.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see more and more the cloud providers are saying, hey, no, you can actually trust us. We've got this certification. You can put federal data on here in certain circumstances and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So you think
Mike,
that it'll be a similar track? Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh no, I was going to ask Mike about that because I haven't been in the consulting space for quite some time. But I just did a piece on this, and it seems like at least for the cloud platforms, for like SageMaker and some of the sort of baseline non-generative AI tools, there's a lot of not regulation, but there's like these cloud platforms are like, yes, we're FERPA certified and we're HIPAA certified, and like we're certified to host all this data. But that seems to be a big thing with the LLMs, is that like what you send to OpenAI isn't covered under those same frameworks now. So it seems like the cloud providers have gone, at least for the data management side, that way. But like for the LLMs, that doesn't seem to be as mature yet. So it was just it was interesting, curious how you see that going forward.
Well, I think it's going to get better and people are going to have more confidence in it. But I also think because of the plethora of models we have, you can, kind of choose your own adventure. So we have one client that does resume to job matching at scale. And what we created for them was actually a hybrid system that's using OpenAI on Azure for some kind of unstructured data analysis, textual data work, but then is using an open source LLM, which is self-hosted, for some of the more confidential things like PII retrieval from resumes. And so we've coupled those two together to create something where the client is comfortable with the kind of the security posture of those two combined systems.
Okay. And Mike, that leads me to another question. With a lot of these companies that are now piloting programs and coming up with some of these initial usage of generative AI and large language models, are we getting to the point where they're evaluating it and then giving either the thumbs up or thumbs down on this? Or is there still a ways to go before they make a decision about, we've spent how much money on this? Like where are the companies that you're working with, without giving any clients away, without giving any client information away? Because of course all of your projects are awesome, but what are you seeing in terms of most of the companies that you work with?
So we see a range. We work with about 400 clients a year, so every client is different.
Yeah.
Some of those clients have pretty deep use cases. So we've got some life sciences clients where we are looking at what it would take to build a custom foundation model to help them with, say, drug discovery or something like that. And that's very specific work. It's expensive to do. You need a lot of expertise and a lot of data to train a model from scratch. But we're also seeing a lot of clients who are doing much smaller kind of proofs of concept, proofs of value. And actually, I would say that's where the bulk of the world is today.
Yeah.
I think, from my perspective, is people are dipping their toe in the water. They're spending, well, I don't want to quote numbers. They're spending,
millions and millions
amounts of money,
billions of dollars.
Depends on, but they're spending, relatively small amounts of money compared to like what the software industry attracts as a whole.
Sure.
And they're really trying to say, can I get value out of this for my specific use case? So you think of some stuff. I mean, every company I know has a knowledge management problem, right? Like every employee has to know all about, company policies or particular details of all the products that they sell. If they're in a support role, they've got to know all about all the stuff that can go wrong with their system. And Gen AI is a really great way to surface that to those people to allow them to access all of that information. And so that's a really popular area for us helping clients to start getting bootstrapped. But the problem is it's a moving target as well, because everybody's cloud platform is introducing new search tech that will then do that. So even if you implement something kind of largely custom, tomorrow, some new piece of technology might come along and kind of make that a little bit obsolete.
Well, yeah.
Are we still trying to solve this Sorry.
Go ahead.
How are we still trying to solve the same problem around surfacing like this knowledge work, right? Like this is the 1980s. This is expert systems in AI. This was where all the research was in the 80s, and it didn't work that well. This was what big data was supposed to save this from us. We're supposed to be able to put everything in these giant, high velocity platforms and be able to surface it. Then search was going to fix this for us. And that was what Google was all about. And now we're here again with LLMs because we all these companies where we can't find anything.
Early chatbots were like that too. We're in the customer service space, right?
Yep. And I mean, they're still there, right? Like a lot of times you're still hitting these chatbots on the customer service space.
Well, it always feels like also that a lot of companies went after the low hanging fruit of, okay, we're going to tell you about everything great that it does. And you could start with A, B, and C. And so it feels like all of the companies are going after A, B, and C. And then if they get to D, E, and F, those are big, big problems, like maybe 1 or 2 years down the road. I don't even know if companies are going to get past A, B, and C at this point.
I mean, that's where, people are going. Like when I was still, before I became an academic, I did work in consulting for a little while and at a large company. And, you see these things, right? Like, and you look at the chatbots, you look at the surfacing thing. Like if you can just only get to A, B, and C, sometimes if you're a large enough company, the ROI on that is very high. And so if you're answering hundreds of thousands of customer calls a day and you can make it 1 second quicker, like that's a lot of money. And that's, I think where a lot of you're going to see some of this AI really, really surfaces and on the back end and making a lot of these things, easier to use. And I think it's when the question you asked us at the top of the show is like, have we reached peak AI? Like we might have reached like peak going to chatgpt.com, but I don't think we've reached peak, like where this is going to get integrated into the tools and processes that we use every day.
Well, I've got some more examples to give you where we can talk about that too. But Mike, do you think that companies might be pulling the plug at some point, or is it still way too early? I've asked this to some other guests of when do the bean counters start coming in and going, hello, where's my ROI on this $1,000 million project that we've approved? Or is the promise of AI something that is they're willing to wait for?
I think at the moment it's something where people feel there is something to be achieved through this, and they're willing to invest somewhat speculative dollars in doing so. I do think there are going to be some high-profile failures. There are going to be people who spend money on building something that was too ambitious and not getting the value out of it.
Right.
So I think there are going to be some failures. I also think a lot of this comes down to the cost benefit equation, and the cost of running these AI systems, especially generative AI, is really, really unknown right at the moment. So Google and Microsoft both came out with $30 a month pricing for their AI features for Microsoft 365 and for the Google suite.
Yep.
They don't actually know whether it's going to cost them $30 a month to run this, right? They've got no idea. They're just picking a number. I mean, this is... I don't know for sure. I'm not inside those companies, but my guess is that they're picking a number and they're saying, we think it's worth this. Now, for a lot of companies, $30 a month per user, if you save like 1 minute a day, right, getting the AI to write you an email or help you analyze a spreadsheet or something like that, then it's worth it. I can imagine like a lot of bean counters multiplying 30 by number of employees and saying, I don't want to suddenly have, tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra bill for this service. I think the other thing is the inference, running the models. If you've got a custom model and you're running it and you're trying to get some kind of value from it, there are so many different options of how you actually run that thing. Do you run it on a cloud platform? Do you buy your own hardware? Do you scale it down? So there's techniques like quantization that allow you to take a very high fidelity model and produce a less high fidelity one that can still give you good answers, but can run faster and cheaper. Every day, well, not every day, but weekly, someone comes out with some new hardware. So NVIDIA just came out with something. I saw a YouTube thumbnail that says 4,400% faster.
Yeah.
That's not even a number. I can't even tell how much faster that is.
Well,
right?
because of the amount of hardware that comes out and the new software features that come out, do you get a sense that maybe there's some IT people out there or people that have to make these decisions about an AI project that they go, oh, there's way too much, I should just wait? Or is that not the case? Like they're getting pressure from a board saying, where's this AI project you promised me? and then they're jumping in too early.
I think the board is winning in this particular case. I think people are saying, no, things are moving too quickly. I want to be careful. But I think the boards who are pressuring companies to move faster, I think they're right. Because if you haven't done any Gen AI work at all, you're gonna be miles away when the clarity does arrive. And then the other thing that we didn't talk about yet, lots of these are proofs of concept with small data sets. To do this for real, you need to run this on real production data. You need to get your data house in order so that you can even access that data that's often locked up in kind of disparate systems. There's tons of red tape. It's difficult to get hold of that data to even run these systems for real, because if you've got garbage in, garbage out is the problem. And so I would argue that people need to be investing in their data landscape as a whole right now, regardless of how fast they think they want to move with AI.
So Gen AI might be the best thing for data scientists, even more than data science, like all the hype that was around the data scientists from a few years ago.
I just got done teaching my data science class. What are you talking about? But this is the thing, right? Like, I mean, I think Mike hit on a really important point here. Like all of these things, right? Like this stuff is built on data, and if you don't have access, like all of machine learning, all of AI to some extent, not all of AI, but all of especially machine learning is premised on the fact that like data about the past can predict the future. And if you don't have the data about the past, then there's no future to predict. And if the data you have from the past isn't even related to the future, then you're never going to predict anything, right? Like that's the entire sort of fundamental mindset that stuff works from. And so I think Mike's point is really, really good in that, like, if you want, you're not going to get magic unless you have the data to produce that magic.
Right.
And
right.
I lost count of the number of times when I was still doing consulting. I lost count of the number of times that I would walk into these places and they're like, "We want to predict X." I'm like, "Well, what data do you have on X?" And they like have nothing. And you're like, "Okay, well, this isn't going to go anywhere."
Yeah.
And the thing with these LLMs, the part that's great is like it's these huge. Like we're using the internet as the data set because we're just looking at how words map to each other, and so that's the scale that we're at.
Yeah,
that's how much data.
Well, that's another question that I want to ask about data is you're starting to see companies that are pushing back on giving away their text and data for free. So a lot of these LLMs were basically scraping the internet early on before we knew what it was going on. But now you've got Twitter, or whatever they're called these days, Reddit, they're pulling back so that you can't grab any of these Reddit forums. Media companies like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they're like, no, you can't have our stuff. Or they're saying that now, and then I think they're just waiting for a licensing agreement. So like, yes, you can use our stuff for the low price of $40 a month or whatever. If this data, Wikipedia's out here running the internet and still not making money, right? I know. I still get the pop-up menu that says, "Please give us $5," which then I X out. Anyway, I'm a bad person. If this data pool dries up, does this mean that like that's it? Like forget it, game over, or is it just a small blip, Nick?
I think I actually just wrote a piece about this for MIT Sloan. I was about the data and the sort of the ways that it works. I think you're seeing very interesting bits of the use case here, right? So like having access to say New York Times headlines and like Wall Street Journal headlines and like Twitter or Threads or whatever.
Twitter, Threads, X.
That lets these things. Yeah, that lets these things be, up to date, right? So when you ask who the president is, it knows who the president is. And so these models to answer kind of those trivia question type queries, that's what it needs that, right? It needs to know, it needs to have a current factual basis of some variety. But it doesn't need that to like help, fix the grammar in your document, right? Because there's enough good sort of just examples of English on the internet. Now, if we only had access to like Shakespeare or something, maybe things get a little weird, but in general, it has access to enough, high quality, just words to kind of work there. And so that's where I think you see the media companies and especially, Meta having Threads, like they might be the only ones that have access to real-time data now, so I wouldn't count them out for that sort of thing. But that's, and I think you're right. I think it's a licensing thing. It's like New York Times is out here saying, "Hey, we spend a lot of money to make sure things are current, to provide good content, and you should pay us for it." Yeah,
Mike, any thoughts on the data thing?
I mean, I think Nick hit the nail on the head. It's the latest in sort of licensing commercial maneuvers. I'm sitting here in Canada and we had Bill C-18 that passed recently. And that was intended to fairly reimburse content producers for the content that they create that's surfaced through platforms like Facebook and Instagram. And what actually happened was Facebook and all the other platforms switched off the ability to post Canadian content through their platform, and not only said we're not going to pay Canadian companies for their content, they actually ended up slightly extorting them to use paid posts to get to their original audience that they were trying to get to. So this has generated a huge kerfuffle here in Canada, and I think the whole, I think this is upending again business models on the internet. So like, the internet started out and it was free, and then the nerds had gifted it to everybody and everybody was happy. And then somebody figured out that you could do transactions, and somebody else figured out that you could show ads. And then the entire thing became this kind of ad revenue supported model. Now today we have the attention economy where people are scrolling on their phone and they don't realize this, but their brain is plugged into a supercomputer that is trying to predict how can I keep this person scrolling on my phone, and we see all the negative outcomes from that as humanity. I think this is just the next phase of that, which is that when AI can, in theory, steal anything, rip anything off, clone anything, everybody needs to be much more careful about what is happening to the data, the content that they are investing in producing. So I don't know where it's going to end up. I'm not looking forward to the day where an AI that I'm using stops actually giving me a legitimate answer and embeds an advert in whatever it's telling me, because that's the way that they end up monetizing these things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
It'll be like I'll type in something like, what temperature should I bake my chicken at? And it'll be like, well, Keith, I'll tell you, but first you have to watch this 30-second ad from AT&T or something like that. I mean, it's already like that with YouTube, and most of the videos I watch now are all attached with advertising. But we love YouTube because we're on this platform as well. All right, I got it. So, in terms of scariness, however, I was wondering if we've reached that point of quote unquote peak scariness. Are we going to see some stories or abilities of Gen AI or ChatGPT that go, wow, that is that's really scary. I didn't realize it could do that. Or do we think that humans have done enough damage already with coming up with bad ways to use this, or is another shoe about to drop?
I've we just working on this book, and it's one of these things. I think trying to predict all the ways that humans are going to use tools to do scary things is kind of an impossible task.
True.
And so that's the kind of the attitude I have about it. Is like there's always going to be another scary thing, and I think waiting for peak scary is maybe, you're going to be waiting a long time, because that's what it is, right? Like that's kind of the cool and the crazy dangerous part about doing AI and like building these things. It's like we're kind of making tools, and I'm not sort of an instrumentalist in saying that tools don't have value, but like, inherent value. But the idea is like you kind of generate these tools, and then people are going to use them in ways that you thought of, in ways that you never thought of, because people are very smart and creative, and they're going to figure out ways to do things they want to do. And so that's where I think some of the peak scary can really come in, and now that you've given folks these tools that are able to, automatically convert text to speech. Well, you could help people who are blind, but you could also use this to robocall thousands of people and try to extort phone numbers, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of creative ways that I think I don't think we've hit peak scary, but that doesn't mean that we should be worried about it. I think. I'm not trying to be like alarmist.
Well, would peak scary help drive us towards that trough of disillusionment if more and more stories keep coming out about people doing awful things, and then someone might go, oh God, do I really have to deal with this AI? Let's just not use it. Mike, you got a thought on that? Or Nick? Yeah, either one.
Go ahead, Mike. No, I was just going to jump in quickly to give back to Mike. It's like, I think, peak scary, lots of people die in car accidents still, right? Like, and so like it depends. It's this relationship between how useful is it and how much damage could it cause, right? And that's, I think, the balance that we're always kind of wrestling with as a society.
And I think scary is difficult because it's so personal for people. Like a lot of folks, they rate the risk of something based on how close it has been to them and their lives. So if for example somebody in your family unfortunately died of cancer, you are probably going to rate cancer as much bigger risk simply because of your personal connection to that. So we did some consumer research over the last few weeks. We haven't actually published it yet, but one of the stats in there is that something like 75% of Americans are extremely concerned about AI-generated misinformation in the forthcoming US election. And I think that's a phenomenal stat that many people are worried about it. But then there's a question about whether that actually matters because, politics is so polarizing these days that people accept things that reinforce their existing worldview and they reject things that challenge their worldview, regardless of sort of the truth or honesty behind those things. But so personally, if I'm looking from the sidelines and eating popcorn, I would imagine the US election is going to be a real battleground for scary AI stuff that might go on. And I also think that the headline things, people, attention grabbing stuff like, voice cloning and things like that. That's one thing. If you're really clever and you're a really bad actor, you're going to do much more subtle stuff than that. And you're going to do those subtle things at scale. And those are the things that I would worry about in terms of kind of peak AI scariness. One thing, I called my bank the other day and they have this disclaimer at the beginning of the IVR thing that says, we may use your voice to authenticate you, right? And I'm now looking for the option to opt out of that because I'm like, no, don't do that. I know that's broken already, right? Why are you still telling me that?
Because we could just take this video and the previous video that you did with us and then I can become Mike. That's part of my plan for evil domination.
Well, speaking of that, Keith, actually, I mean, one of the questions, right? I keep asking for a checkbox in my email that can train an AI to respond to emails as though it were me, rather than using sort of a generic voice, and that's coming, right? But here's the question: if I've worked for ThoughtWorks for more than 20 years now, right? Let's say we train a bot on all of the video calls I've ever done, all of the emails I've ever sent, and we end up with Robot Mike, right? And then I move on to a different company.
Yep.
Who owns Robot Mike at that point? I think my current company owns Robot Mike, but it's trained on all the stuff that I've already done. At what point will we start as people who work in whatever jobs we do? You got the Screen Actors Guild and the writers are all on strike still. It's been going on for months because of the AI threat to jobs. I think some of that kind of scary, I think, is going to continue to sort of dawn on people, the ability to do that stuff.
Mike, you're doing a great job of promoting previous episodes of Today in Tech that we've done, because we just did one on the AI avatars and whether regular employees will be able to own their digital likeness. But then we also did one about deep fakes in the 2024 election and whether or not we're going to be able to stop any of this stuff. So again, if you're interested in this, just keep watching and subscribing to Today in Tech. Those are some great things. Nick, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about on this peak scariness? I think you've.
I mean, it's. I was going to say, Digital Nick they're making me actively build Digital Nick because as we sort of deliver more educational content online, they've got all my videos and things like that. So that's it touches a lot of, at least on the teaching function of my job. It touches a lot of the things that we do. And who owns that data that you generate at work? It's usually your work.
True.
Sorry, we all signed that contract a long time ago. But yeah, it is a little scary.
I think all the videos I've done are still owned by the company, but I don't have anything yet that says, well, they're going to be able to create an AI version of me yet. I suppose that we would have to rewrite employee contracts for a lot of this stuff. All right, so I think we've touched on this, but I want to reset the bar a little bit. Instead of maybe this trough of disillusionment, is it possible that we could see pockets of success and pockets of failure where it's not just a deep dive, but it's like, okay, here, but in this case, it's here. So we go down and up at the same time versus maybe something where there's not going to be a blanket, AI, everything AI is awful. Like, do you see that evolving? Mike?
So I think we're going to see some really awesome headlines about some really positive things that AI can do. So recently in the news, Microsoft and a company called Page announced that they're doing AI for cancer detection via kind of image recognition.
Yep.
They've got about 4 million images, and they're going to be doing cancer detection on top of that. I firmly believe that efforts like that are going to succeed. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff in medicine where AI is really genuinely producing better outcomes for patients and is genuinely useful to humanity. But a lot of those are going to require significant funding, expert researchers, exactly all the right people to be doing them. I've got a lot of faith that can happen. I think some of the smaller efforts where people just kind of go off and throw a bunch of data around, I think those are going to be a waste of time or not produce the right outcomes. I think there is a lot, and Nick would concur on this, I think there's a lot of expertise really required here. It's not as easy as everybody makes out. So I think we're going to see those useful use cases. I also think, to be fair, humans are incredibly good at getting used to what computers can do. So all of the stuff that we were seeing 3 months ago where ChatGPT could, summarize things, expound upon things, give me my company annual report in the style of the Hamilton musical, those kinds of things that are quite remarkable, they are going to become kind of old hat. The problem with AI is actually the definition of AI is stuff that computers can't do yet. And so as soon as we figure out how to get them to do something, we move the goalposts. It must be very frustrating, Nick, being a AI researcher because of that.
Mike, I got my notes. You stole my joke, like one, right before I got to it. But this is, it's very true, right? And I think, Keith picking up on the overall thing is that, we've seen a lot of successes of AI. We've already, like I mentioned, like the T in ChatGPT is the thing that makes your phone text prediction and your spell correction work really well. Like when it's gotten a lot better over the last 10 years, but we've also gotten really used to it. I think we're going to continue to see that, right? We're going to continue to see splashy, like we're going to use AI to do insert questionable thing here that we probably shouldn't really be doing. And then it's not going to work, right? But you're going to see in instances where there's the right data and there's the right expertise. And I think Mike's right. I think medical is one of these big ones, right? Since we've moved into more of a electronic health record space, there's more data there. There's more ability to like track patients and things like that. Like I've worked with a few folks here around at the med school, and that's really what it's all about, is like the places where you've got really volume, massive volumes of data.
Yeah.
By massive volumes, I mean internet scale data sets, and you have the expertise to work with those. I think you're going to see advances there. And then again, like Mike said, we're going to just we're just going to normalize all this stuff, right? Like, so the Copilot, the code completion and code assist tools from Microsoft and things like that, they do the first job I had out of college, right? Like when I basically translated Fortran into Python, and like that job doesn't exist anymore but like, that's just the thing. Like we don't even hire people for that job anymore because it's just like, yeah, sure. Like it'll just, it just does it, right? So we just get incredibly used to how quickly these things are coming. And then, it's not AI anymore. It's just like, it's just what the computer does.
Yeah, I think from the media side of things, that it's all well and good that these deeper projects are going to be developed, but that doesn't make as much headlines. Bad news sells a lot more than good news. And as much as I'd love to see all of these, cancer detection and diagnosis through AI, you're going to see some stories about that, but it's not going to be as exciting as someone doing something really stupid with AI, unfortunately. But that's the media landscape that we live in.
Yeah, but one of these successes, I mean, like a good like sort of example that I was thinking about the other day is, because I got my parents' new car and it it does the parallel parking on its own, right? Or it like pulls into the tight spaces on its own, which is a self-driving car. But now we're just like, it's just pulling into the parking space by itself. Like I only get out of the car and push a button and then it goes on its own, right? Like, yeah, it's fine. I drive a 2003 Honda Element. Like it doesn't do that. Like, come on. Like and then we're just like, this is fine. And no, self-driving cars are never coming, except for it does this parallel parking thing that nobody likes to do anyway. So
the most exciting thing about my latest vehicle that I bought was that I had a USB charging port for my phone, and I was really excited about that. But I'm way behind I'm like 2 or 3 levels of behind on cars. But speaking of cars, there's a parallel between all of the money that was thrown at self-driving cars. And maybe it was because the bar that they set was that it's the Jetsons, it's future, you're going to step in a car, it's going to drive you wherever you want, and it's never going to get into an accident, it's never going to run through a concrete, that's been poured. That was one of the stories that came out. Like one of the cars drove through a police line, I think. You started seeing some of these. So there was disillusionment there. And what did companies do? It's like, well, we've thrown all this money at it. Here's another big giant bag of money that we're going to throw at it. Could you see that happening in the AI space too, where it's like, we've already invested all this money. We've got to get some kind of return on it. Or does it become more like NFT, blockchain, those types of technologies? Mike.
So I think there is a there for AI. I think we've already proven that. I mean, one of the things I really love, and Nick mentioned this earlier, the interest in Gen AI has refreshed everybody's interest in AI in general, and it is a broad topic.
Yeah.
There's lots going on there. Part of the thing to remember here is self-driving cars is about the most difficult problem we could possibly have picked. The bar for perfection is extremely high there. If anything goes wrong, there's lots of eyes on it. Whereas the bar for AI to be useful, if you've got something where you still have human in the loop, you've still got somebody who's looking at the outputs from that thing, and that person becomes, I don't know, if you even just save somebody 10 minutes a day as an employee, that's actually worth a ton of value when you scale that out.
Yep.
So actually AI doesn't have to be as earth-shatteringly successful as self-driving would be. And I think, if you look at the amount of money in self-driving and the amount of industry that would change, it's crazy, right? Like if everything was self-drive, we'd only need like 5% of the cars. All the repair shops would go out of business. Insurance companies would completely change. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's difficult to state how big a deal self-drive would be, and I think that's why it's taking a long time to get there. Whereas saving me, Mike, half an hour a day because it's helping me organize my emails better, or do some productivity thing, or respond to customers faster, or create a sales proposal, or whatever stuff it's doing. If the AI goes wrong in that case, well, you've still got Mike here. I can still probably qualified to do the job, and the bar for making it useful is a lot lower.
Yeah, Nick, have we lowered the bar on AI expectations, or is it still set pretty high?
It's one of those things. I don't think it's ever going to go down, right? Because it's like asking if the sci-fi expectations are ever going to come down. Because I think we're always just going to manage to come up with like, well, what if it did this, right? Well, what if it did that? And no matter how cool it is in the moment, and like if you can imagine like going back and showing your grandfather, when he was your age, the same thing, it'd be like, that how does the plane stay in the air? I don't understand. These things, I think the bar is always going to stay high. But I think it's important, I think it's cool to keep the bar high. Like we should have expectations of our self-driving cars that are super high. Mm-hmm. I'm with Mike. I look forward to the day when we get rid of all the parking lots because all of the cars drive themselves. And then we have more parks because there's no more parking lots. And those are amazing, animating goals, right? And this is the whole idea behind, I think last time I was on, Keith, we were talking about the Turing test and the singularity, right? I think setting the bar high is what animates a lot of what we try to do. We want to try to get it to do all of these amazing things. And, we're probably not going to get there, but as long as we make some good progress, it's good. I think it helps keep people excited about it.
As long as we don't as long as we don't completely destroy the planet, we'll still be okay, right?
That's fair.
Well, and I think the question of how far we can get is still a really open one. I talked to a lot of people in the industry, including somebody who I know well at a major chip manufacturer, and he was basically saying that there is no limit to how smart you can make these things if you throw more data and more compute at them to do the training. And his contention was the world hasn't really figured that out yet. And when we do, the organizations and the companies that figure out I can make really, really smart AI here if I build it in this way and get it to solve these problems, those who figure that out fastest are going to win in this next kind of, AI generational step that we're all taking.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that disillusionment is inevitable just because that's the way that humans act? We hype something and then we tear it down, and there's always going to be disillusionment, whether it's a technology like AI versus NFT, blockchain, something else, some of these other technologies. Is it just inevitable and we just sort of recover faster then, and that's how we get away from that little dip? Nick, you want to start?
I mean, I think the dip always kind of come in, but that's just, we always want to expect more things, than we're going to get. But it's important to realize that, like, just because there's a little, I mean, at least as a research side, as this side of it, it's like just because it doesn't deliver right now doesn't mean it's never going to deliver, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go back and look at something like, I mean, not even in tech, but you look at like mRNA vaccines, right? Which is a thing that they started doing research on in the 70s. They're like, hey, like one day this is going to like change things. And it's going to make everything awesome. And then it did. It took a long time. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we get excited about possibilities, and then when we start to realize timescales, like maybe, that's where that disillusionment kind of comes from. At least I think as a person, I think as a business, I think these are slightly different questions about what can I realize. But at least as a person, like you hear about something cool, like you want it now, like you don't want to wait.
Yeah, like I'm still waiting for my time machine and my flying car, or a time machine that's also a flying car. Still haven't gotten it.
There you go.
Yeah, Mike, any thoughts on that, or are we going to sort of see almost like a curve, like up and down, up and down, up and down?
I think the hype is natural, right? I think if you look at the way industry and media are structured,
yep.
Industry comes out with some new thing. Media likes to report on it because, cool stuff is good for eyeballs. If you look at companies, the big cloud platforms, they have invested billions in the hardware to run this stuff. And they need to make sure that we are all as excited about running AI as they are about owning the hardware to run AI. So there's a whole bunch of folks who are kind of creating this hype cycle right now. And, that's just the way of things. I think there's always going to be a hype cycle. And with the pace at which information moves, now that we have the internet, social media, all that other stuff, I think hype cycles are inevitable, and we're just in one for AI right now.
Okay.
I do think there are great things coming out of it, though, as we've discussed.
Well, I guess at this point, this is what I want to ask each of you guys. Are you still excited about AI, or have you been disillusioned at all? Even if it's up and down, that's okay. If you have had some disillusionment, like where are you still at? And has it changed since last year? Nick, we'll start with you.
I think I'm one of these weird guys. I went to, I took my first AI class in college in 2004, which was like the nadir of computer science enrollment after the tech bust, after the 2000s tech bubble burst. My AI class had 5 people in it. That class now has 500 people in it. Right.
Wow,
so,
okay.
I've always been a big believer in this. One of the things that one of the most exciting parts of one of my former jobs, I worked at IBM. I got to sit with some of the folks who worked on Deep Blue, which was the chess playing computer that beat Garry Kasparov in chess, which was one of these amazing moments for AI, right? Like I got to work with the folks that, worked on Watson and things like that. Like it's, I haven't been that disillusioned yet, because I keep staying in this. I keep staying in this field. I keep working and I keep doing research here because there's always so much more exciting things to do. And not everything you do is going to work out, but a lot of it does. And a lot of it's really, I think, changed the way that we do things, that we live our lives and do business and everything. So I haven't hit my disillusionment yet, but I'm a pretty optimistic guy.
Okay,
in general,
Mike,
so.
where are you, Mike?
I'm also a pretty optimistic guy around AI, especially. And I think that although there will be some things that don't work out, there's plenty more momentum, which is showing us this stuff is still really exciting. There's some really good outcomes that you can get. I think it's important for people to keep their expectations in check just a little bit. Remember that when you see something from somebody who's trying to sell you a thing, that it's marketing, there's glossy videos around everything, and the actuality of using these products is not always gonna live up to the hype. The question is it useful? Is it worth it? I think so. I think yes.
All right, I'm going to tell you where I am at this point. I track it to the analogy of a relationship. With my marriage, you get romance, and then you get some disillusionment, and then you either go back to romance, or eventually it turns into joy. And so it's eventually it's almost like there's a pattern for marriage as well. So I have been disillusioned, but I keep looking for that next thing too. I'm generally an optimist, so I think you will have some. I just want to be the guy that says, "Hey, look, I predicted the disillusionment," and if that happens, then I'll be happy. One final question. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see the Republican debate where Chris Christie accused Vivek of being like ChatGPT? I don't know. Did you guys see that at all?
I saw the clip.
Yeah, I saw the clip too. I didn't watch the whole debate. Mike, did you see it?
I didn't see the clip.
Okay, I'm wondering if this is someone like, so he accused his opponent of being robotic-like, and he basically threw out ChatGPT, and I'm wondering if that's going to be like the straw that breaks this disillusionment back of like, politicians are now like getting some shots in, or it's like I'm getting burned by Chris Christie on this technology if I'm ChatGPT.
Was he taking advertising money for saying ChatGPT instead of just, hey, somebody who sounds like a robot, right? Like, I mean,
right?
There's been previous ones that just call him a robot. Now we have like the robot has a name.
Well, you can't just call someone a robot anymore. Now you have to sound cool and be like, oh, I'm with it. I know what ChatGPT is. Woohoo! maybe that's all it was. But I'm hoping that it doesn't become so mainstream that like then people can start getting digs on it without understanding what it's all about. All right. Great conversation, guys. I really want to thank you guys for joining us on the show today. Nick, I'm at some point I'm having you back because you're going to get disillusioned at some point.
One day,
or prove to me that you're not AI Nick yet. So that'll come once you get that project.
That part's getting harder and harder.
And Mike, I'll have you on whenever you guys want to be on. So thanks for joining us on the show.
Love to, Keith. Thanks.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.